Hi, everybody. I am here today with my sweet friend Colleen Kessler, and
Hello.
she is the owner of Raising Lifelong Learners. Um, Colleen is a gifted specialist. She is an educational consultant, an author, a speaker, and the homeschool mom of four kids who are gifted and twice exceptional. And all that makes me tired just saying it.
Yeah, it makes me
So,
tired living it.
okay, so I know you have something exciting going on in November. Colleen has a new book coming out. So this book is not on the topic of hands-on learning. So that's not the topic that we'll discuss here, but I want to give Colleen just a minute to tell us a little bit about her book. So we'll be ready when it comes out, and then we'll move on to our topic.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so like Wendy said, I'm an author. I've written lots of books on all sorts of different topics, but a lot on hands-on learning, and I'll show you a couple of those. But I'm really excited. The book that comes out in November is called Raising Resilient Sons, A Boy Mom's Guide to Building Strong, Confident, and Emotionally Intelligent Families. And so while the focus is initially on boys and how they think and the kinds of things we need to do to help them be strong yet nurturing and empathetic, it really is filled with loads and loads of hands-on and practical tips for just building strength and confidence and empathy in your family. And I'm so excited about it because I'm really passionate about emotional intelligence and empathetic learning and understanding with our kids and helping them be able to nurture each other and then being able to do that as a family. So we strengthen our kids' emotional understanding of the world and each other, and my gosh, especially now.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited. That comes out officially November 24th, and so you'll be hearing more about that. I'm sure, like in October, I'll be begging Wendy to put me back on, and we'll talk.
And we would love to. We would love to. So you'll have to be sure to remind me right before it
Okay.
comes out.
Yeah,
We'll look up and it'll be November.
I know.
So that happens.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on. We're going to talk today about hands-on learning. And some of us who have homeschooled for a long time know what that means, and we've incorporated that for a long time. Others of us may not use a whole lot of hands-on learning, and depending on maybe how we were schooled ourselves or things like that, it just may or may not be something we're familiar with. So the first thing I'd like for you to talk about is for homeschoolers who are maybe new or who just don't really know what that means. Can you talk for just a few minutes and just tell us what does that mean anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so broad, first of all, that it's one of those things that's easily incorporated into just about anything you do. But like in a nutshell, really hands-on learning is getting your kids' whole bodies involved in learning in some capacity. So having some kind of tangible activity or product or piece or strategy involved in what you do. And that can look a variety of ways. And I know we'll talk about that, but as simple as using manipulatives in math or getting kids involved in cooking to do fractions or um, building, oh gosh, like one of my kids' favorite projects that they remember from when they were little was building the Great Wall of China out of foam craft blocks, but then being able to act out what's happening in their history program. So anything that requires them to move and get actively involved in the learning space can kind of be filed under the category of hands-on learning.
And now I have a question for you too, just so I don't forget to ask it.
Yeah.
A lot of times we think of hands-on learning as being something that's important to preschoolers and to lower elementary school. What do you think about that? Is that something we should be trying to do all the way? I have a high school senior. Do I need to be doing this with her?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And we do think about being hands-on and more experience-based when the kids are littler. And it's super important when they're little because that's how they learn about their world, right? By doing their living actively. But we tend to often make it more about bookwork and paper pencil stuff when our kids, as they age, primarily because that's how we learned as we got older.
Right.
And we're used to that being kind of stereotypically what middle school and high school looks like. But the fact of the matter is, we should be continuing on hands-on experiences all throughout learning. And in some ways, it's even more important as they get older because they're dealing with more difficult concepts and they're really kind of figuring out who they are in the world, and they're learning to, like, this is a good time for mentorships and hooking up with other members of the community who are interested in the same things they're interested in. So they learn by doing. And it is also important because that gives them a social outlet, and it's really easy for teens to kind of like withdraw into themselves or isolate themselves because there's just so much work to do. So you might need to be more intentional about it as they get older, but yes, you absolutely want to keep it going as they get older. I would say it's just as, if not more important, as when they are little.
Okay, that's just like I said, we often think about that when we have small kids, but we don't think so much about it as they get older. So now talk to us for a minute about some reasons why. I know you just covered some reasons why we should incorporate it with older kids, but do you have more information? Do you want to elaborate a little bit on why we should incorporate hands-on learning?
Yeah. And like we could talk for a couple days about this if you want. There's lots of reasons. But actually, wait, I'm going to backtrack for 1 second because we were talking about little kids versus big kids, and that one of the reasons I became so passionate about hands-on learning, and one of the things that I think a lot of your followers and viewers of this video can take away is that it's a way to access everybody no matter what their level is. So if you've got a kid who is gifted, we talked in the beginning about my background is gifted education and twice exceptionalities, and twice exceptional kids are kids who are gifted IQ wise. They're higher than average, but they also have some kind of neurological, psychological, educational disability along with it. So when you're dealing with kids who are like discrepantly wired, they're differently wired and they see the world in a different way, or they struggle in some areas, hands-on learning allows you to get right in there where they are. And so, especially if you've got a special needs kid, no matter how old they are, by doing something with their hands, you're tapping into multiple modalities, meaning, so for all kids, let's get back to the question at hand, like, why should you even do this? When you're incorporating something kinesthetically, something hands-on or body on, you're tapping into their learning, right? Their cognition, their brain tapping into or latching on to whatever the concept is. But then you're also giving them the tactile experience. They're touching things, they're moving. The saying of, you never really forget how to ride a bike once you learn. The reason for that is because when you're riding a bike or doing anything physical like that, playing a sport, learning to hit a ball when you play softball, is because you're thinking about the steps, you're seeing what you're doing, you're feeling what you're doing, and then your muscles are doing it too. So you've got just riding a bike, you've got 4 modalities going at once. And so it sticks in your brain better than anything else. So using that same philosophy for our education with our kids, the more we can have them do, listening to a chapter be shared and reading a chapter, and then building the Great Wall of China to take their toys to act out on that craft piece. You're doing multiple things to really learn the same concept. So you're getting a better likelihood of it sticking. So hands-on learning at its core is really a way to just throw retention through the roof. Your kids are going to remember it because their brains are wired. Everybody's brain is wired to remember things better the more you see it. And so just by virtue of doing something hands-on, they're at the same time, they're seeing it in 3 different ways. So retention first and foremost, but then also it's more engaging. It's way more interesting for a kid, no matter what their age is, to learn something by doing it, which is why it's so easy to incorporate that, like you said, with the littler kids, because you see them get excited about it. You see them like move their hands in the Play-Doh and count out the numbers or get their little people. And I have pictures of my oldest, who's 17 now. Oh my gosh. But like baking something, one of the things that comes to mind is we baked Viking bread when we were studying Vikings. Like, I mean, it's not like the perfect rendition of Viking bread because we were not over an open fire and we actually used yeast, you know. But he's got his little Lego characters helping to stir the dough and pour things in, but like it's so much more fun for them to get actively involved in the lesson. So you've got their engagement, their buy-in is better. They want to do it because it doesn't seem like learning to them. It just seems like something fun they're doing with mom. And then their engagement is sticking. They're remembering that forever. You also show how it applies to their everyday life.
Mm.
You know, if we're doing, so my, here's another example to kind of show what I mean by that. Last year, we learned about a small little, I don't know, it's like a business out of a house that are the people who own it are two super colorful, quirky characters, and they have a glass blowing oven and a blacksmithing oven on their property, and they opened up and offered to. They were selling their wares out of their this business, but they were also offering lessons to homeschoolers and other kids and adults who wanted to come in. And we've learned about glass blowing and blacksmithing before, but I thought this would be really fun. We did a 3-week class, and the first week they went in and they blew a glass bulb, and it needs several weeks to anneal in the oven. So they went through the process hand over hand. The glass blower was working with them with the equipment. So even my 6-year-old was doing it. And then they put it in the annealing oven. And then the next week we came back and they did glass fusing, broken pieces of glass, breaking them, putting them together to create a piece of art. And that has to go into an annealing oven, but it doesn't take as long to anneal as the blown glass. And then so the third week they came back and they used the iron and they forged in the blacksmithing oven an ornament holder for their glass ball that they blew the first week. Because blacksmithing is done as soon as it cools. Like you can take it home that day. So that third week, they were able to take home their fused project and their bulb and their ornament holder. So they learned how to work with iron. And because they were surrounded by all the old-fashioned tools, they were asking questions. My son was 16 at the time. He was asking how nails were formed, and the guy took him through how people used to have to make a nail. They couldn't go to the hardware store, and so they made a nail start to finish. And he remembers this, and anytime he reads anything about a blacksmith, he's like, yeah, you remember how hot that oven is? I can't believe what people had to put up with to be there. So you can find these little gems. Now that's a big one, but anything like that shows what it's like in real life and then can apply to their future. Like maybe I want to get into something that's more of a trade like that. And you can find somebody like that quirky guy who's got a blacksmithing oven in his home to teach your kid. But then even cooking, now they know how to plan a recipe start to finish and double it or half it and that kind of thing. So it's very
Sorry.
it's okay. It's very hands-on and very real life, and so then it applies to every day and their future. And then finally, like I think one of the even bigger reasons that's like a stealth kind of reason is it teaches them critical thinking skills. It in a way that you're not beating them over the head with like thinking games or Q&A or multiple choice questions or whatever. They have to decide in that moment, to go back to the glass blowing, if their arm's getting tired, like they have to decide in that moment, I'm going to ask for help or my project's going to crash and burn and I'm not going to be able to keep it going. And so, knowing when to ask for help versus knowing when to do it on your own, that's a really important skill.
Yes.
That not everybody learns or they feel comfortable. Like you have to feel comfortable asking for help when you're holding 1,000-degree iron. But then even lesser, if the pot's boiling over, knowing that, okay, there are some tricks. You can put a spoon on it to keep the boiling over, stir it, those kinds of things. Problem solving, this isn't lining up. Well, what if I do it this way instead? You know, visually, spatially, they're working with moving things around. So you're improving critical thinking skills in a way that they don't even know they're learning those thinking skills. And then you can ask them questions about what they're doing. And then so you're creating a dialogue, and you can compare it to how it was in the past or what's going on during current events, and how they can learn from those to be questioning, you know, what's in the news or whatever. So it just creates these really easy and accessible opportunities for dialoguing with your kids. And you're not having to lecture or
Right.
tell them what you want them to think and learn about things. It's just a natural kind of outcropping of the activity that you're doing.
One of the things that I like, as you were describing all these things too, my kids are 25 and 23, and my baby is 17. And
Oh.
so I know it's so sad. That was I have my 25-year-old is my daughter who has autism. She's the one who walked in here to give me this scrunchie. I do not know why this was important at this moment, but she thought I needed it. So one of the things that I like about everything you're saying is these are also ways to build relationships with your kids.
Yes.
Because when you're doing these hands-on activities, not only is it more fun for us, because we don't want our homeschool day to be boring and torturous either. So it's more fun for our kids,
Mhm.
increases learning, makes it more fun for us. And then it really helps us build those relationships with our kids, because we know then, or at least have more of an opportunity to hear their thoughts and feelings, to understand what they do and don't know, to maybe discover their strengths and weaknesses and things like that, that otherwise, if we just plunked them down with a textbook and a workbook. And one of my kids loved textbooks and workbooks, and that was okay. I did a lot of those with her because she liked filling out those pages and getting that work done and seeing it. So that's okay. But these hands-on activities are really a great way to build knowledge, interest, and to get to know our kids. And now that mine are getting older, one left the nest just a few months ago, and I'm so thankful for those years that I had to develop those relationships with my kids.
Yeah,
So
and to that point, and that's actually something that I talk a lot about in that book that's coming out. That building connections with your kid. And actually, Wendy, you'll have to remind me when we get off, because I recently published like a cheat sheet kind of with like 50 different ideas for connecting with your kids, and
oh,
a lot
that's
of them are
great.
hands-on. So I have to send you that link. But
Okay, we'll share that too. We'll
yeah,
share that in the article where we're sharing this, so I'll so everybody can have access to it, if that's okay with
okay.
you.
So when you build those connections with your kids and that relationship with your kid when they're little, first of all, it becomes natural. It's
Mm-hmm.
just what you do. And second of all, when they get to those teen years or young adult years, they want to share what's going on with
That's
you,
right.
because that's just become part of how you live.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets exhausting in a different way, right? When you have little ones, you're getting up super
Yeah.
early, you're making sure they have everything they need and they're being fed. And then when they're older, they're coming down at like 1 o'clock in the morning with all of the big thoughts that are in their head. But when you build those relationships when they're little, they are comfortable coming to you
Yeah.
when a thought is keeping them up at night. So you get to be the one to talk them through those big worries and
Mm-hmm.
those big thoughts and those big, like my son was just coming down, he and his cousin who's 19. So Trevor will be 18 in November, and he'll be a senior this year. But I'm done with him actually homeschool wise. He's doing just college classes. But for various reasons, we're officially graduating him after next year, as chronologically when he'd finish his senior year. But he and his 19-year-old cousin who just graduated this year are looking at apartments, right? But
That's scary,
because
isn't it?
it is, but because he and I have had this relationship where we've really talked things through and
Mm-hmm.
we've thought critically about life. He's just looking at it to kind of humor his cousin and go along and talk about like, yeah, we should probably live together like in 5 or 6 years. Because then he'll come to me and he'll be like, well, the rent is here, but I don't think he really understands that you've got to buy laundry detergent and dish soap and
Yep.
bills and there's utilities. But so he's thought critically about those kinds of things because we've just talked about everything, and he sees what we're doing, and it almost becomes a lifestyle, right? You're
Yeah.
not doing school from 8 to 3. You're doing school as part of life, and it
Mm-hmm.
just naturally goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Okay. So do you want to talk a little more about some skills that are used when kids are learning in a hands-on way, or have you already covered what you want to talk about?
Yeah, like as far as skills go, I think that that depends on whatever subject you're in, right?
Sure.
Because a math skill would be learned hands-on by doing cooking, or maybe we could talk about just some different ways, like for parents who are like, I don't even know how to
Yeah.
do this, especially. So first, like, let me just speak directly to all of you who are coming into homeschooling, because
Yes.
whatever is going on right now is not your ideal way of having your kids learn, right? I'm so empathetic for both sides of this, because I came from a teaching background. I taught for a decade and a half in the school system. I still consult with people, and my husband is still a teacher. And so we're in that perspective. We're not worried about what our kids are going to be doing academically next year because they already homeschool. But I'm watching my husband figure out like what teaching is going to look like for himself. He's a reading specialist, and it's really hard to work one-on-one with a kid who struggles with reading via a camera.
Right.
And so we're just, I'm watching that, be navigated. And so for those of you who are coming into homeschooling because you know your kid is not going to get what they need being on a computer, 8 to 3 or whatever, and you're nervous about this, let me just help you relax a little bit. It's perfectly acceptable to buy a curriculum and
Yes.
be okay with having a curriculum laid out for you in a box, where you know that you're going to do history like 3 times a week, and you're going to do it this way, and science this way. And what I would encourage you to do is look at least like a week ahead, if you've chosen to go that route, if you're not going to kind of pick and choose what like some of us do. If you're just going to choose a system and go with it, read a week or two ahead, kind of plan your stuff out and see where you could really easily, without over stressing yourself,
Right.
substitute something that they would have written or answered questions with something that is more hands-on and more fun. Go in baby steps. You'll start to see that it's really easy to do. They're still learning and retaining, and you'll probably by the end of the year feel more comfortable substituting more and more and more and more out. But it's really okay, like wherever you're coming at it from, whether you've been homeschooling forever and you just want it to be a little bit more engaging and fun for your kids because it's been such a weird year, or you're coming in and never having done this ever in your life and you're just scared and you want a framework so you don't miss anything. All of that is fine, and it's easy to incorporate some things, just a couple things here and there. So the easiest thing I would say probably, if we're starting to incorporate hands-on learning, is start with stuff you're doing already. Cooking. Make sure you're inviting at least one of your children each time to whatever meal you're preparing. Snacks, have them plan things out, talk about what they're doing. Ooh, this recipe's pretty big. Do you think that you can help me like tone it down? Can we split this in half? They don't even realize they're doing fractions, but they're doing fractions. So you could do things really easily that way. Bring in some hands-on manipulatives and stuff. I'm going to show you, I've got piles of stuff here. I'm going to show you some really easy things that you
Oh,
can pull
good.
in. So we keep, okay, so these are like just blocks. Like these are, I love these actually, but they're some of the blocks that we use like for math and stuff. They're just wooden stars. Aren't they beautiful?
Those are pretty.
I found them
Those
on
are
an Etsy
nice.
shop. But just get anything, buttons, anything, like you could
Mhm.
just throw those into math, right? Have them show you. You can even do that in science, right? If you're classifying, if your kids are at the age where they're learning to classify, separate these by color. Okay, separate these by size,
Mhm.
separate these by, whatever. You tell me how you're separating them, because they'll surprise you. They'll come up with like spots or patterns or whatever.
Mhm.
Really easy to incorporate. And we use all sorts of materials that don't seem like they'd be learning materials for play when they're little, because then I'm asking them to tell me stories about what
Mm.
they're doing with their play. I've got this box I'm just going to show you. It's this little divided tray, and they pull these out all the time for play. There's just random things, wooden rings. There's these little felt stars and some bean bags, little wooden people. And then this is Play-Doh that used to be different colors. It's now like almost all brown, but you can just set these kinds of things out so that they are pulling them to play with, and then they're using those plays to create stories. And the piece that comes in for you is asking them what they're doing. Tell me about, not what what are you doing? Tell me about why you chose to put this there and this there. Really simple. And now you've got language arts covered. You've got writing covered, because especially for those of you who are new, writing is different than handwriting.
Yes. Good point.
Yes. Writing is learning how to articulate an idea with a beginning, middle, end, and details. And they don't have to, especially when they're little, they don't have to write everything to count it as writing. If they're learning how to tell stories, or they're learning how to retell or summarize something that they've read, and they're putting in details, they've done writing. You need to do the fine motor skills of handwriting, but you don't need to do both of those every single day. So the storytelling is super helpful. And then if you just don't even know where to begin, get some books out of the library. There are so many books that give you ideas, and most of us think about those books as being like hands-on science experiment books, and there are those. But there are also books that aren't those and give you different ways to incorporate hands-on learning. I'm going to be promotion.
I was going to say, please show us yours, because I know you have some things that cover that.
Two of mine are for, a couple of mine are first. Like this one you can get on my site. And you can get it in a PDF form or the book form. I like it actually in PDF form because I can print it. It was created to look like cards inside. So you can print it and then let your kids choose. These are just creativity and thinking, building activities. And there's lots of different kinds in here that relate to different things: imagination, creating, creativity, experimenting, thinking skills, celebrations, and then just like what these learning skills are.
Now, are those for all ages, Colleen, or certain ages, or what do you suggest?
So they can be, depending on how much creativity has been drummed out of your kids, right?
Yeah.
So they can be, my 13-year-old loves this book, and she loves to do the activities in it with her younger siblings, but she also likes to do it with her 12 and 14-year-old friends.
Okay.
So especially like the thinking things, because like there's a section, you know, where you're just asking questions like, how would life be different if there were no cars? Do you like convertibles? Why or why not? They're just like thought starters and stuff.
Okay.
So the bigger kids will do those.
Okay.
This is a book you can get, and this is a science book, but you can get this at any bookstore or whatever. This book I wrote 2 years ago now. Can you believe that? It's been out 2 full years.
I know. Time passes so fast.
It does. This is called 100 Backyard Activities That Are the Dirtiest, Coolest, Creepy Crawliest Ever. And it's all backyard science activities that relate to different things that you would find in the backyard. Worms.
I wish you had written that back years ago when I first started homeschooling my kids, because they would have loved that.
Yes. And
anything that makes a mess.
And it's funny, how different kids are, right? So I've been writing books for a long time, and you can find my books on my site. You can find them everywhere else too, like where books are sold. But I've been writing books with hands-on activities in science for a long time because I was an educational freelance writer before I started homeschooling and writing more about that. And my now 13-year-old, it was about 4 years ago, and I still will never let her live it down, said I'd be a real author when I stopped writing about science and bugs and stuff. So even when you're living that life, the kids who live with you don't necessarily like that same kind of stuff.
No.
So
no.
I have other books, and you can find them on the site. These are just other hands-on books. They were written originally for teachers, but you could use them at home too. I'm not going to go through those titles because I want to show you that just by going to the library or Amazon, you can find a bunch of different things to get you started on different subjects.
Yeah, and I would love for you to talk for a few minutes about that, because we do have so many people who are starting out this year and we're not expecting to homeschool. So
yes. Yeah, and it's really easy to bring fun things in, and you'll be teaching them concepts that it doesn't seem to them like you're teaching concepts, right? I'll say this when we're talking about the different subjects in school, especially for those of you who are new, is things like learning to read, learning math, basic grammar and punctuation. Those are skill-based subjects where each skill kind of builds on the previous skill. Like you can't go into calculus if you haven't learned your math facts. You're not going to be able to read a novel if you haven't learned basic phonics. So know that there's a reason historically the 3 R's have been always highlighted: reading, writing, and arithmetic. You have to learn those skills in order to be doing other things. But the content areas, all the art and music and science and history and social studies and geography, none of that has to be learned according to any specific timeline. So you can totally take advantage of whatever your kids are interested in at a given moment and not follow the sequence in a book or a textbook and just jump back and forth, because it's not going to affect, if you start with World War II, it's not going to affect their understanding of colonization.
Right.
They're still going to get it. And so that gives you some freedom, right, to open up and use hands-on learning, especially in those other areas.
Right.
And then come back to the skill-based areas.
Or even if you're moving through that in the sequence in your book, because I know there are some moms who are just that OCD and they need to go through the book, and I'm kind of one of them myself. But if my kids come across a topic that they're particularly interested in, I do feel free to stop and take a little more time to more thoroughly explore that topic before we keep going. So even if you feel like, no, I can't skip around, I just can't do that, that's okay. Just if your child or more than one child are interested in certain topics, just pause and explore those topics a little more fully before you keep going. So you can work it in that way too.
Yeah. Funny story, when we were doing, gosh, way back when we first started homeschooling, we did Mystery of History for a while. And it's very story-based for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And my kids were fascinated by the parts about ancient Egypt. And I think we spent 6 months on ancient Egypt, just watching videos, mummifying all of our toys and wrapping them in toilet paper and sending them to the other world. And, you know, that's okay. And they'll remember that fondly. And then they'll be able to use that when they learn other parts of history later.
Right.
So, okay, so real quick, I'm going to show you 2 books that my kids are loving right now that are math related. So you can pull in some different kinds of hands-on learning with math. So this one is by Karen Tripp. Do you know her from Teach Beside Me? It's called what is it called? Math Art, Drawing and Games for Kids. So this book is all different art projects and drawing projects and games to use all different math skills. There's multiplication and Fibonacci wheels and mandala drawings and kirigami and origami. And so it takes problem solving skills and applies them in different ways. And so it can really be used in all ages. And same thing with this book. It's another one, Math Games for Kids, because they can be applied in all sorts of different ways across the board age-wise. So you can find these kinds of things to supplement your skill-based areas and still bring some fun in. You could also do this with just regular games off the shelf. Yahtzee is addition, right?
That's right.
There's
Scrabble for spelling, vocabulary. Yeah.
And you can designate a day every day of the week that's going to be like game day. And they think that they're getting away with a 4-day school week, but they're really learning more during those games than anything else, because they're learning cooperation skills. They're learning to get along. They're learning about luck versus strategy. They're learning how to apply problem-solving strategy to games. And at the very least, do a game a day, right?
Yeah.
After lunch every day, this is game time.
So that's one of the things Trish and I talk about, is incorporating games into your homeschool. We have some information about that, because it really is a very hands-on way to build skills, but also that cooperation and the relationships, which is, you know, when you think about all those things, it's kind of, you know, why would you not want to do that? It's just so beneficial all the way around. So
yes, and you guys talk about travel too. Travel is a very hands-on way to learn.
Yeah, true.
Very experiential, and a really good kind of like validation for skipping around or pausing something.
True.
Because if you're going on a trip to Hawaii, which is not going to happen right now, but if you're going on a trip,
but we're going to get there
eventually. But if you're going on a trip to Hawaii, why wouldn't it make sense to talk about Pearl Harbor
right.
and World War II? Because you're going to be able to go to the Pearl Harbor exhibit there and see firsthand. And so your kids are going to retain that and understand that way longer than they would have if they just read the chapter in the book about Pearl Harbor. And you're also getting them engaged in learning about where they're going before they go. We did that when we traveled across the country. I was speaking in California and we live in Ohio. And we took a 14-day road trip out Route 66. We like hopped on and off Route 66.
Yeah.
The kids picked some certain spots that they really wanted to see on Route 66. And then the rest of the time we were like on, 40 or something, the bypass. Anyway, so we weren't like just
Don't ask me anything that has to do with directions.
Yeah. I'll ask Trish.
She'll know.
We would jump on and off, but we talked about the painted forest and the petrified forest and the Grand Canyon. And so when they finally got to see those three places, they were really engaged and they didn't want to buy in the gift shop, a teddy bear. They wanted to buy pieces of petrified wood to bring home because it was a very real experience for them because we learned about it and did it. So travel is a great way. Games are a great way. Books are a great way. Toys are a great way to incorporate hands-on learning. There's a bunch of different books on all different subjects. I'm not going to go through them all, but I do want to say, like, science, there's some for, but there's lots of art ones that are all creativity. This is about cardboard art. This is about string art. Handwriting. You don't think handwriting can be super. This is about making cursive pretty. There's projects in there about like painting on rocks with cursive and hand lettering. I mean, they're learning all sorts of language art skills that way. I've got some sewing and some kitchen science books, but what I wanted to bring up, actually, this is one my 7-year-old just got. It's woodworking.
Oh, yeah, my daughter actually was really interested in woodworking when she was younger. We did it for a while.
This is a brand new book. The publisher Quarto Kids just sent it to me to check out, and my 7-year-old took it, and I have not even had a chance to look through it. He's really excited about doing those with Dad. Okay, if you just need, now this is for all of us, because you new homeschoolers are not the only ones who are adjusting to schedules.
That's true.
We found out that our co-op is not meeting in the fall, at least for the fall semester. We have 2 families that are kind of like following the same protocols we are, and we've been getting together with them weekly over the last couple weeks because we also have kids with anxiety and some special needs, and this is very mental health wise. This whole pandemic time has been really difficult.
Yes.
And so we need to make sure that, especially for our kids with special needs and mental health issues, that they get a chance to connect. So these other 2 families, we've been really careful and really intentional about once a week getting them together to play, because everything else is canceled. There's no theater, there's no music, there's no art, there's no co-op classes or museum classes or anything. So like all of us, right? We're all facing this like endless day. You can't school all day. You will make yourself crazy.
That's right.
But kids need routine and kids need structure and they need novelty. So one of the things that I started doing years ago is picking up simple kits. Like this is a kit.
I love those.
Yes, when they're on clearance, because I mean, you could go to Target, those end caps, they always have things like this. Michaels sells them and you can use the 40% off coupons for them. This one, it has a book in the front and a box that has all the stuff to make little pom-pom puppies. And so that's helping with problem solving skills, patience, fine motor, gross motor, collaboration, because the little kids are being helped by the big kids. So I would really suggest to think outside the box when you're trying to come up with ideas to incorporate hands-on learning. Hands-on learning, hands-on fun and crafting is hands-on learning, and it's a sanity saver, and you are going to need a lot of kind of things in your back pocket
Right.
to help kids out. I know you talked already about reading and reading aloud and reading together. So
Mhm.
books, games, kits,
Yeah.
and projects are so important right now to have on hand.
Yeah. And they're okay. We don't have to feel guilty. We don't have to feel like our kids aren't learning that day. If you're have had all you can take this week and have taught all you can teach and everybody's going crazy, take Friday and do some of these little kits and
Yes,
activities and things, and don't feel like you're not doing school, because your kids are still learning so much just by reading and following instructions.
yes, yes.
They're benefiting from that. So
And
that's a good point.
it's okay if you set out a bunch of kits and you don't do them with them.
Yeah,
You need a day. Like there is nothing that is more important than your mental health
that's
and your
right.
kids' mental health. And
Hmm.
so if you're feeling frazzled and just done, listen to yourself, listen to
Hmm.
your body and your brain, and read a book while the kids craft,
Yes.
or sit and stare into space while the kids craft. It is okay to do that. And then tell them, come show me what you create. I'm going to
Hmm.
go do this for right now.
Hmm.
Um, it's good for them to learn. That's learning too, right? We
That
take care of
is.
ourselves. My kids know, so I'm an introvert that can be extroverted when I have to, especially for work.
Yeah.
But my kids know when I need time. In fact, they joke about it. My 13-year-old said to me the other day, she's like, "I can tell you're done peopling. Would you like me to leave
Yes.
you alone?" And
Mhm.
but that's good for them to learn, right? Because they
Yes.
know when they get to be an adult that it's okay to tell
Yeah.
people what you need.
Yeah.
So all of that is important, and it's all hands on, right? That's real life living right there.
Well, and it really is. And those are the kinds of skills, those of us who already homeschool, um, already hopefully know some of these things. And the people who are homeschooling, whether they really want to or not, may realize that there's so many benefits that they don't know about ahead of time. But our kids really do learn to read us and to understand those things. And it's okay for us to help them. When you see mama look like this, that means I really need a break. And let me tell you, they will learn to recognize that look,
Oh
and
yeah.
they will start to say, oh, okay, mom has that look. We're going to take her and put her in her room and let her take a little break, and
Uh-huh.
we're going to do something else for everybody's safety and happiness. So,
It's so funny you say that. I promise this is the last little tangential
go ahead.
story. I was sitting around with my two teens, my 17 and my 13-year-old the other day, and we were talking about that. And they said, "Oh yeah, mom, you've got obvious tells when you're feeling that way. Your eyes get wider, you make better eye contact with the person you're talking to." And we can tell just by the look on your face and the way your eyes move that you're done and you need a break. And
Yep.
here I thought they had no idea, and I had to tell them. And they're like, "Oh no!" And they're comparing with each other the different tells that I give off for my different moods. I
Yeah,
thought it was hilarious, but my gosh, what a good lesson, because
that's
they will
right.
be married someday and they will have children someday, and they will know to how to learn to read their spouse and their
Hmm.
children and their
Hmm.
boss. And these are
And how to teach their children and
yes,
spouses to read them. And
exactly.
my family does that too. In fact, that's my daughter, my 17-year-old, does that to me. She's like, okay, mom's done for the day, everybody leave her alone.
It's so
And
funny.
it's pretty awesome when I get put in timeout. I
Yep,
love it.
yep, I love it. That's
Well, I appreciate so much you taking a little bit of time to talk to us today about hands-on learning and several other related topics.
uh-huh.
And I think these things that we've talked about will be super helpful, not only to people who are already homeschooling, but especially to those who are new to homeschooling and maybe need some ideas and encouragement. And I truly always enjoy visiting with you anyway. And
Yeah.
so thank you for being here to talk to us a little bit.
Yeah, well, thank you. This was fun. And I just love talking about this topic and encouraging others. You guys can do this, whether you've been doing it for a million years or you are terrified because this is your first year.
Yeah,
It's going to be fine. Nobody loves your kids like you do.
that's right. That's right. And you'll have to let us know now when your new book comes out in November. We
I
will be
will.
watching for that and we'll share that information. So I will talk to you again then before you know it.
Yeah, sounds good. All right.
Thanks, Colleen.
Bye.
Bye.